Your podcast doesn't need more motivation, it needs a system. In this episode, I'm going to talk about why most podcasts quit. Most podcasts do not disappear because the host ran out of things to say. They disappear because every episode feels like starting a new business from scratch. There is no leverage that comes from, oh, I have been doing this for a while, so I have a system, I have a framework for addressing and approaching the podcast. Instead, every time I'm starting, it's still um, I'm doing the podcast for the very first time again and again and again and again. And it's just overwhelming. Let me explain why motivation fails. At the beginning of starting a podcast, you're excited about choosing the name, designing the cover art, buying equipment, inviting your first guest. And you're like, oh, I can't even believe someone accepted to be a guest on my podcast. And then you announcing the podcast to the world. You telling them, oh, I just started a podcast. Amazing, 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 amazing. After a couple of episodes, the hidden work appears. No longer becomes fancy. And now you're trying to look for the next topic. Okay. Now you're still trying to book guests. That's if you're doing guest interview for your show. You're chasing guest information, editing, writing show notes, creating thumbnails, you're uploading, promoting, you're fixing technical issues. The podcast did not become boring. The process became exhausting. There's so many things you have to do. By the way, we can take that off your plates, like in the description. Yeah, we can take that off your plates. I want us to look at the 5 reasons. Of course, there are multiple reasons, but the 5 common reasons why people become inconsistent with their podcast. Okay. There is no content idea system. Okay. So every time you want to film content, you want to make a podcast episode, you sit down and you're like, what should I make? And the thing now is that it's not even about sitting down and saying, what should I make? It's more about, because you do not have a content idea system, you never get to sit down to make the content because you're like, oh, I don't really have an idea yet. Okay. 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 I don't really have an idea. Okay. Then the other one is, there is no recording schedule. So you don't know when do I record, there is no time for it. So it becomes when I feel like it, when I have time, when I have chance. And you all know that there are so many things, especially if you're running a business, there's so many things that need your time and attention. So if you do not time block that, this is the time I do recording of interviews. This is the time I record my podcast episodes. Well, that time may never come, and you're like, oh, I'm going to record. Versus when you say, this is the time I do it. There is no production checklist. And so every time you recording an episode, it's all about vibes. You don't know, okay, this is what I'm supposed to do, this is what I'm supposed to do, this is what I'm supposed to do. And every task depends on the host. You come up with the idea, you record the episode, you do the editing, and then when you do the editing, you have to schedule the episodes. It's crazy. There is no episode buffer. So I talk about there is no content idea system, there is no recording schedule, there is no production checklist. Every task depends on the host. And the 5th one is there is no episode buffer. And there's this overwhelm, this posting anxiety, this content anxiety that comes from, oh, I have to release an episode, especially if you've picked a time, then you're like, oh, I need to be consistent. And so this anxiety comes, and then at a point in time, you just freeze and you're like, you don't post content. Okay. You don't post content. And you're like, okay, I need to release an episode on Monday. And sometimes you forget. Sometimes it's just crazy. There's no episode buffer. With episode buffer, it gives you enough time to think ahead. Because now you're not like rushing to say, oh, I need to release an episode. And you're doing everything, mixing everything together. It's crazy. And the ideas are not even up to par. And because the ideas are not up to par, you're not even happy with the episodes you're releasing because they're not up to your standard, because you didn't get enough time to do it as well as you would have loved to do it. Okay. Now that I've talked about these 5 core problems, what are the solutions? What can you do? So I'm going to present the Podnovation podcast operating system, what I like to use for clients and then also for my own podcast. The first thing you want to do is have a content bank, an idea system. Okay. And what is this content bank? You may ask. It's the questions clients ask, the mistakes you see people make, the myths in the industry, the personal experiences, the frameworks and processes you have, the case studies, the reactions to industry trends that actually relates to what you're doing. Okay. For example, let's say you have a health podcast. Okay, health podcast is very big. Let's say you have a, a podcast for healthcare businesses. And one of the trends in industry is AI in medical industry. And so let's say a new technology comes up and you talk about, okay, this is the AI that healthcare businesses could use. And so you're not just reacting to say, oh, not the kind of reaction from pop culture content. I'm talking about the reaction where you're like, okay, this is what it means for my people. And there are a lot of things that's happening. Okay. And it depends on your industry. So each of these depends on your industry and the kind of podcast you have. And then if you do interviews, there are guest conversations. Okay. So interviewing, finding, booking guests for your podcast. The system number 2 is the recording reading. Okay. So how often will you record? If you're doing a solo episode, if you're doing a solo podcast where each episode is about 20 minutes long, and what you do is you just sit and you talk and you address questions and then you share your story and share your personal experience. And that's what you do. What will happen is that you can record 4 episodes, 20 minutes in about 2 to 3 hours in a month. And you're pretty much done with it in 2 to 3 hours. Finish recording and that's it. Okay. And you can pick a date and a day and a time for that, and you block it in your calendar, and that's what you do. You see, now because you already have the content idea, the content bank system, now you have ideas ahead of time. And so when the day comes, you already have these ideas and these outlines and these things, and you can just sit there and talk about it for 15 to 20 minutes. Okay. And you don't have to do 1 month, you could do twice a month. You could do once every 2 weeks, picking a time depending on what works for you and the kind of show that would allow it to not become a thing of vibes, becomes of a thing. Okay, this is when it happens and this is when I record. Okay, so the next system you need to put in place is the production pipeline. So you want to have a system. Okay, I have an idea. I talk about the content bank, the idea bank, where you just dump the ideas, and the idea goes from scheduled. So you schedule, okay, I pick 3 to 4, 5 ideas, and I'm going to record them on my recording day. And it goes from recorded, and then it's edited, and from edited, it's reviewed, and then from reviewed, it's then scheduled and published and repurposed. Now, of all these places, okay, the one you need to focus on is probably the idea part, because it's your business. You get these conversations, and the recording part, those 2 parts, and then the other part can be handled for you. You can work with our team to do the editing and the publishing, or you can get a VA to do the minor edits and schedule for you. Okay. Then the system 4 is the episode buffer. Now, if you've done system 1, system 2, system 3, system 4, what would happen is you would have episode buffer. But even though you have episode buffer where, okay, this month I record 4 episodes and that's the 4 episodes for the month, you also want to have episode buffer because you don't really know what's going to happen. Okay. Let's say you might be sick the day you're supposed to record. What happens? You might be sick for 1 week, 2 weeks. So what happens then? You want to have episodes where they're like 1 month in advance. And so okay. So kind of like 2 months in advance, but that doesn't happen immediately. It's more like eventually as you start doing these episodes pile up and you have this buffer. And so you're not always in a haste. And so if you miss because something came up, something important, health issue, emergency, these things happen where you miss that day. It doesn't mean that, because I missed that day, no episodes for the month or things like that. You have those buffer. Okay. So what should you focus on? Now you have a team, now you have a system. You focus on, my perspective. What makes me so unique in this industry? What's my story? What's my expertise? What's my relationship? And then the final approval. And then things like the editing, the guest coordination, if you do guest interviews, the show notes, the uploading, thumbnails, the clips, the scheduling, the distribution. You can outsource that to a team or get a VA to do that for you. Okay. So what I would ask you to do as a way to know in terms of the podcast process is look at, if you already have a podcast, look at what you're working on. What are the recurring podcast tasks? Like every time as long as this podcast keeps running, these are things that keep coming up. Write it down. and ask yourself who currently owns that task. Okay, it could be you. Maybe you're just the one juggling everything. Uh, when is it completed? And then what happens when that person is unavailable? And usually it's you. And what you notice that you see most of the tasks that you can outsource to other persons. Okay. So the buffer is usually it's for you. So if you have a buffer, if something happens to you, let's say if or you travel, you lose your computer crash, where you cannot record. Well, because of that buffer, the podcast can still go live. You can still show the podcast can still be consistent. And usually, if it's a problem that you cannot solve in 1 month, usually you really need to take a break. Yeah, but you see what happens is now you create a system that can allow the podcast to be consistent while being able to operate in real world and real life because things happen and it's not just dependent on you. So what I want to leave with you is do not ask whether you're motivated enough to continue podcasting. Because the thing is, like, oh, I feel like I'm not consistent because I'm not motivated. Those people who are consistent, those podcasters who are consistent, they are motivated. The question you need to be asking yourself is, does my podcast have a system? Question you should have is, do I have a podcast system strong enough to continue when motivation disappears? Podnovation can audit your current workflow system with you or manage the production process for you. And you can click in the link in the description to book a call to see how we can help you create a system that allows you to show up consistently. And I'll see you in the next episode.